Hello, my name is Serenity Kylis, and with me I have Ben. Would you like to introduce yourself, Ben, and I could just go and get the stream out there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Emlyn Jones, and once again, I'm with Ren McInnes. I've done this is I think the third video I've done with Ren, and the last two were really interesting. So I'm expecting this one to be as well, and hopefully be joined by someone else soon.
Yeah, I'm just getting these. I'm going to my channel and getting the stream out there.
Okay,
Like putting it on Twitter, it
I'll
takes a
share it.
little while
No problem. I'll
to
share it.
share.
Thanks for watching, anyone who's watching. Appreciate you joining us.
Maybe have to just download the stream and just edit out the long delay. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe edit out the really long
I
delay.
found actually incidentally that this is something I found on my channel, and I noticed it with yours. Is that live streams are taking longer to process into recordings because you can't download them until they're properly processed into recordings. And it's the last one we did together. I wanted to download it because I put it on my own channel. It took like about more than 2 days, and then finally it worked. And that never used to be a problem. In the old days, it used to be like usually about the length of time the live stream was how long it would take to process. I don't know why YouTube are doing that, or if it's a bug, or whether it's deliberate. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't get it either. Sorry. It's
It's
just
okay. No,
all
no rush. I will.
taking me about.
I'll,
But you should see the link on Twitter.
I see. I'll share it. There we are. There we go. It's on my timeline now.
Yeah, and hopefully Lonely Wolf would be joining us soon. But I mean, we could still get started without you. Because it's kind of like both of you are Christian, I believe. Like you're a Christian, he's a Christian, and I just thought that we could just had a talk about religion.
Sure, I mean, it's a very interesting subject. I wouldn't describe myself as a Christian. I am, at the same time, I wouldn't describe myself as an atheist. See, religion is something that seems to be universal among our species. Every human seems to, it exists in all human societies. There's even evidence to suggest some animals exhibit religious behavior, like elephants as well. Um, it's not something, of course, everyone has. However, I myself have gone through several phases because I was originally from a Christian family. My parents are Roman Catholic. My mother was from a big Catholic family. My dad converted. I was baptized at the age of 17, but I lapsed, and I actually went through a like classic atheist phase. And by classic atheist, I mean kind of Richard Dawkins, early 2000s sort of thing. But I've changed my mind a little bit. You see, it's all very, very complicated. But what is God? What does God? Hello, Lonely Wolf. How you doing?
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. It's because I've heard so much, like I've heard you so much, so now I get to speak to you for the face to face.
That's great to see. I've seen you on a couple of streams, and I've seen you in the comments. So I'm a bit familiar with you. Well, I've encountered you before.
Please keep talking. It's like Lonely Wolf
Yes.
into the stream, and I want to make sure that I include him on Twitter.
Yeah, right you are. I've shared it, so hopefully everyone will be able to see it. It's great to talk about one of these things that people have been talking about for thousands of years. You never know. Today we might find the answers. After 5,000 years of philosophy and an argument and debate, we could be the ones who get the final answer. You never know. That'd be cool, wouldn't it? That would be history being made. Just imagine it.
Yeah, because I guess
Yeah, and
my thing is that well, I never really did identify with atheism in itself. Like I'm still a believer in everything. I've changed my mind on a lot of things. So mostly, well, I'm actually spending more time because I'm sort of going to church again, and so I'm mainly of the Catholic.
Yeah, I myself have been through several phases, and I mean, I'm actually come from a Catholic family. My mother was from an old a Limburg Roman Catholic family in the Netherlands, and my dad was Anglican, but he converted when he married my mum, and I was baptized. I I sort of lapsed. I became a kind of classic atheist. I've already said this to Rin. I just before you came on, but I became a kind of classic atheist for a number of years. I'm in very sort of early 2000s Richard Dawkins type new atheist. That would have been me, although this was slightly before that period. But it didn't last long. I started to see several holes in it, and I I came to the realization that it's quite plausible that the universe has some kind of consciousness that it's convenient to call God. That's that's perfectly plausible. I've not gone back to any practicing any religion though. I've not returned to church, but I am. The phrase spiritual but not religious is kind of a bit of a cliche, which I don't like really. It's a little because it's so full of baggage. It's so loaded down with all kinds of sort of pat cliches and things like that. But that's kind of what I'm like.
yeah, me too. Same here. I'm more spiritual than religious. Like, don't get me wrong, like have found that I have the most in common with Catholics. It's a bit ironic, but not really because, when I was trying to get away from religion, I was trying to get away from like the Pentecostal church. And to this day, I would describe the Pentecostal church as being cults like. But it's kind of like as the left started to get unhinged, like the further left. I mean, I think I sensed this in our little private group. Let me go to Twitter right quick because I'm quite sure that I posted this in the little private group that we all have. And I just want to share with everybody. Okay, the person says if conservatives want fires to stop, they either got to learn to raise the dead or stop police from shooting unarmed black people. One seems easier than the other. And it's kind of like this person is threatening to start fires, and it's like you're threatening to start fires in what's usually black neighborhoods. It's kind of like as the left is going off the deep end. It's kind of a lot like I don't find myself having much in common with the left, anymore because they just seem so it's kind of like I find myself having more in common with the Catholics. It's like now like I would go to like the Catholic Church, and I would have far more in common with Catholics than I do the left because it's kind of like like they keep threatening to like burn down like black people's businesses, and like now you see more and more black people speaking out against Black Lives Matter because it's like like there are black business owners, and it's kind of like you're putting black business owners out of work.
Yeah.
In what sense does it make to be like, I'm Black Lives Matter, but putting black business owners out of work? Or it's like it doesn't really make sense. It's like they would be like shooting people up in black neighborhoods. They would like put, the Black Lives Matter graffiti in black businesses and black homes. So it's kind of like did they're almost like the new KKK, basically. Like I'm beginning to view them as the new KKK because it's like I don't think that the KKK would be like disappointing points at them. I was at the KKK like congratulating them because there was they would destroy black neighborhoods in the name of Black Lives Matter. And I noticed that like there's a video, I think it was like Andy Neal posted where there were people in a in a black neighborhood saying that they don't want Black Lives Matter around. It's like they don't care about black people killing black people. They only care when a white cop shoots a black person. And not only that, but like they would come from like a different part of town, or they would come from a different states, and they would just come from different states in a different part of town, and they would destroy black people's homes. And there's this like video where there's this woman is screaming, it's like, we live here, we
Yeah.
live here, and you're destroying our property, you're destroying our homes, get out.
It was sad to see. It was very sad to see. And there is something about the BLM riots that does remind me of the old pogroms or witch burnings. I mean, you say in Rin, I mean, that's, and I think if the point you're making is what I think it is, then you're correct, that this is a form of fanaticism that is similar to a religious fanaticism, which you see, it's a secular thing. Obviously, it's all connected to Marxism and various kinds of intersectional theories of the left, but it is a form of faith.
Yeah, it really is like a religion, it's like, and they are getting further and further unhinged, and I think it's because they're used to being in an echo chamber. Like, because of the way Twitter is set up, it's kind of like they don't really face disagreements. And so, they're in this echo chamber, and all they do is just get further and further radicalized. A person would go from being a Sargon fan, and then they would go from being a Sargon fan to going so far to the left that they're unironically spending time on Twitter celebrating murder. Like a person would get murdered to death. They're on Twitter like, mm, 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 mm. It's like they would be celebrating another person's death, and they have no idea how like weird, creepy, scary, and unhinged they look.
Yeah, I mean, what started off as like an atheist part of YouTube or whatever, and there still are channels like that. They focus on that. They try to make a convincing argument or whatever. But for the most part, I mean, like let's say the everyday person who's got sort of like a they might be on the fence, or they might be like me. They've sort of they're slightly spiritual, but they're slightly in the Catholic realm or whatever, and they're not doing a very good job of convincing me to change my mind when they themselves have replaced one religion with another. I mean, they've rejected, religion or spirituality, whatever, but then they've left this spiritually empty kind of landscape behind them, and then they've tried to replace it with something else. And I think that there was the progressive branch, like they latched onto certain feminist ideas, which quickly turned into religious dogma, and now it's disappeared up its own backside. And then, I think with that so-called anti-SJW, with that culture war, it was really there was very much a cult of personality that I saw. They the way that people would defend Sargon when he did things that were sort of like pretty bad, or he made some very weak arguments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've seen that too, where Sargon would make weak arguments, or when Sargon would do something bad, and people would defend him anyway. I mean, it's kind of like you can like Sargon and still, point to someone who he does something wrong. It's like you can love your child, right? But you would still like, point out when your kid does something wrong, like, like let's say your child steals something. You're not going to stop loving your child because they steal something. You'll be like, hey, you don't do that. Like you can, criticize Sargon and still, love his channel. But it's kind of like when you turn Sargon into a person that people can't criticize. I mean, it just, it just makes it look like, I don't know, he's a cult leader or something.
Well, he's like many people. I mean, we were talking off air about Stefan Molyneux. I mean, he's someone I criticise quite harshly at times, but I do listen to what he says, and so I try to listen to people from all areas. But if there is something about, it seems everyone in all fields that they have certain ideas that become pathological. This could be religious or non-religious. It could be left-wing or right-wing. For example, you brought up Sargon. I mean, there's people who celebrate. People on Twitter. You said, Rin, they will celebrate a murder. I've seen people celebrating the murders of people in the BLM. You know, people who've died in the riots, or people who've lost property in the riots. People say they should kill Ken and Karen, you know, the McCloskey couple. I've seen at the same time I've seen people on the alt-right celebrating the death of Heather Heyer and the 51 people who were shot dead in New Zealand. I've seen people celebrating those as good things. And of course, I don't know if it's the detachment of the internet that gives them the ability to do that, but of course, it's appalling it's an appalling thing to do. But they'd still do it. And it's like, it is rather like the person who has a very strong religious belief, believing unbelievers have been lured by the devil. They are essentially the work of Satan, which some people do. And I mean, Rin, you mentioned the Pentecostal church. I mean, you and I live in very different countries. I don't know about you, Lonely Wolf. Are you Australian? You sound Australian.
Yeah.
You, Rin, and I don't know what it's like. I've been to Australia. I don't know what it's like there, but Rin and I, you know, we live in very different countries where religion plays a very different role. And in Britain, less than 25% of people attend any form of religious worship. Most of them are Muslim. Only 10% of people Christians go to church, or people go to church. In the United States, of course, that's much higher. It varies on regions, of course, depends where you are in the States, but generally it's much higher, and the church plays a much bigger role. But in Britain, we find that people will behave in a religious way in my country. And it could be, football's a big thing here. What you call soccer, Rin, is a massive, massive thing in Britain. And people will behave towards their chosen team, the team they support, almost sometimes with a form of religion. It is a kind of religion if you support Liverpool FC or, you know, Tottenham Hotspur or one of these other soccer teams. It becomes like your entire life, and to the point where you'll fight war. You know, people will fight on the streets. It goes outside. It's not just on the pitch. If you lose, there'll be a big fight in the streets outside. You know,
I've heard about that.
That almost reminds me of like when I was in high school. Okay, our school lost in football to another school, and there were like 4 kids in my school, and these 4 kids in my school always bragged about being in a gang, but nobody ever really said anything because they were, you know what? But they, were bragging about being in a gang, and I think that, nobody really took it seriously because, of rappers, always say that and whatnot, and so they're kind of like, oh yeah, well, whatever, it's normal for, but then, these 4 kids, when our school lost in football, these 4 kids went over to like a party that the kids at the other school were having, and they started shooting at people. Now, the only people that died was they actually killed a black man, to be honest. They accidentally killed a black man. He got caught in the crossfire. Other than that, they weren't successful at, shooting or killing anybody except that one guy. And it's kind of a lot like people are like, okay, it's ridiculous to, murder somebody else because our school lost in football.
I don't get it. It's just, I mean, I think perhaps the only reason it doesn't come to that on the British streets is because very, very few people own guns here, and we have very strict gun control laws. But exactly, what is going on? Why do people do this? It's like they lose their minds and they lose all sense of reality. I mean, you don't have to be religious to do that, you see, do you?
Yeah, it's like a religious way that people act. People act in this, and it's like weird because it's like, like people could just leave one religion and just join another religion. It's why It's why I was always critical of Jacqueline Glenn because, to a certain extent, she was repeating Christopher Kitchens, to a certain extent, there are like all of these Christian wars and religious wars, and, people fought wars over religion. And we went like from paganism to like Christianity. So we went from like all of these many several gods. It's like one God. It's kind of like, hey, I mean, we went from several gods to one God. I mean, wouldn't things be better and ideal if we went from one God to zero gods? But really, I just viewed it as the denying the antecedent fallacy, partly because I saw this really old version of I think it was called Planet of the Apes. And in Planet of the Apes it's kind of like men would kill for oil, men would kill for money, men would kill for it would just go for like a long list of things that people would kill for. It's kind of like 9/11. I heard that 9/11 was all about oil. It's like people would go to war for any number of reasons, saying like, we went from all of these religious wars. And it's kind of a lot like, I do wonder if it was like really motivated by religion in its entirety, or if there was like a secondary motivation, like money, territory, land. It's like, to me it's like more, it's kind of like, like how, okay, in America, it was said that we went to war based on a lie. Like, um, Bush sent us to war based on a lie. Like, there was no uranium in Afghanistan. Like there was no uranium found in Afghanistan, no yellow cake. But like, we went to war based on a lie. There was never ever uranium found there, and it was revealed by a CIA agent. Like, I forgot, but there's a movie based on it called Fair Game. Now there's even a book, a memoir called Fair Game, saying like, no, we actually did go to war based on a lie. So it's kind of like, when we did all of these like religious wars, like, was God really used as a cover, and they probably just wanted more land, more territory, more money, or whatnot. It's like, I don't truly just believe that if we get rid of religion, we'll get rid of war. We would just go to war for anything. Or it's kind of like this: America is more secular now and more atheistic now, but murder is actually like on the rise. Like, I had a friend, and a friend, sent to me an article, and it did say that murder has actually increased in America. So it's like we went more secular, but there's an increase in murder. At least according to the article my friend sent me. It's like, like people would just go from, it's like, being violent for, well, people would be violent for anything, but now it's like people are violent in the name of like Black Lives Matter. So it's like, religion wouldn't be the be all and all reason to go to war. And I don't think it really solves anything either, because it's like the benefits of religion is that you have that leader that just to like pull in the reins, like that figure to pull in the reins to like, hey, that's going too far. Hey, you're in the wrong. Like, if you're like listening to a preacher would go to jail if a preacher told you to engage in acts of violence. So, it's like, depending on what he says, he could be held accountable for encouraging you to engage in violent acts. So he's kind of there like to pull in the reins, like, no, don't do this, don't do that. So he's kind of like getting you to stop, and like if you look up to your priest and you were thinking about taking a gun and going on, a certain type of spree, then the priest to kind of like pull in the reins and be kind of like, like, no, don't do that. But it's kind of like now without that leader to just tell you to stop. In fact, there are people who encourage you, like, yeah, go do it. It's kind of like you'd see more people like going and doing it.
That's so interesting you say that, Ren, because that's what okay, I hate to admit this because because out of this group, I'm probably the further leaning towards the left. I mean, there was a time where I was sort of, I would have been backing people like, Bernie Sanders or whatever, or Elizabeth Warren, but now I'm kind of like, yeah, I'd vote Democrat or whatever. So I'd lean more towards the Democrat Party, but unfortunately, it's like I'm very disappointed in the Democrat Party because in such a time of extreme violence and and a lot of people are being victimized, people who have nothing to do with the police and they've got no power whatsoever, who are being victimized, their homes getting destroyed, small businesses going up in flames. And to not see that leadership from the Democrat Party saying, look, this needs to stop. So we're going to increase security so that, that you can feel safe in your streets. Because that's what the average voter wants. They want safety and security and something to look up to. Like the RNC, they seem to be, sending that message of safety, saying, okay, we want to maintain law and order, whereas the Democrats are not doing that. And they're in a position they can afford to do that because Biden and Harris, like they're already hated by the extreme left anyway, like because they're more in the centrist pocket of the Democrat Party anyway. So they're already hated by the far left. So they may as well, I'd feel a bit more comfortable with the Democrats if they had that sense of leadership about them.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
it's
yeah. I was just going to say that to Lonely Wolf. I think it was Vorsh who made a video the other day saying, "Oh, are they trying to lose?" It's like that. Yeah, I mean, but Rin, what you were saying about substitutes for religion, in a sense, when you see the wars, you see people going to war. Very often, it's based on a lie. I mean, you mentioned the WMD and the uranium and things like that, and then by the time people realize it's a lie, it's too late. It's like the worst war in military terms in human history was started by a news. It was encouraged by a news article in 1914 when the actual Daily Herald and several others, including the Daily Mail, some newspapers are still going today. They said that Germany were killing babies. The Kaiser's army marched into Liège in Belgium, and they just took the babies and just impaled them on their bayonets. It was a complete fabrication, but this is what the British Expeditionary Force were told when they went across the sea to start what they thought was the war was going to be over by Christmas, and it lasted almost 5 more Christmases. And so, yeah, lies, in a sense, it's a form of like what's known in Islam as taqiyya, where you can tell lies so long as it's towards the unbeliever, and it furthers the cause. And in a sense, you mentioned sacrifice as well. Now, you didn't use the word, but I think that what you may be referring to is, of course, in the Bible, you hear about how the Israelites. One of the first things the Israelites did. I mean, they indeed. The whole first part of the Bible is about the Israelites and how they took over the Canaan and they killed the people who worship the golden calf and things like that. And that was all done for religion, and they sacrificed, didn't they? You had to take your best bull or your best calf, and you had to kill it in the temple and things like that. There's a lot, massive, very detailed instructions in the Bible about what you do. Yet, and people who are atheists, and we think if you get rid of religion, and that wouldn't happen, there'd be no more of that. But as you said, we say, well, we're going to have to go to war, and we're going to have to kill people because of the oil industry or to save our economy. We don't want to do it, but this is the economy and the political order has to be protected. We put solidarity with the political order above the sanctity of human life, even human life on a vast scale. Even if it means killing people in millions, we're still going to do it because, in a sense, what's the difference? I think is that the point you make? What's the difference between?
That's the problem that I have with Chuck and Glenn, like to a certain extent, it's a bits of the Christopher Hitchens argument, but I mean, I saw a clip and he seemed, almost like he was joking to a certain extent. It's like we went, from, like many gods to one god to, if we go from one god to zero, wouldn't that be fantastic? But, Jacqueline Glenn, expanded upon that and was kind of like, we went from many gods and really, I think that when we had many gods, many people had that patron deity. Like there may have been many gods like Zeus, Athena, Aphrodite, but let's not forget that many of these gods hated each other. What's his name? Neptune or Poseidon. Poseidon he raped Athena. So it's kind of like if you're worshiping Poseidon, you're not going to be, worshiping Athena. And if you're worshiping Athena, you're not going to be worshiping Poseidon. People just had that one patron deity, and like that's it. Maybe they had like a secondary deity. It's like I think Stick Sextonhammer said that like if the king or whatnot was worshiping like Zeus, then people had to pay tribute to Zeus, but people didn't spend their time worshiping, like all of the Greek gods because then they couldn't work or function. Obviously, they just had that like one deity that they worshipped, and like that's it. So it's kind of like even though there were many gods, it was just gods to pick and choose from. Then it's kind of like, went from many gods, like one god, and then not Christianity, but I was about to say that, but Jacqueline Glenn was like, oh yeah, look at all of the religious wars, and it's like, wouldn't it be great if Christianity were to disappear? When the only thing that would mean is that we would stop having religious wars, but that doesn't mean that war would end. We would still fight war, but it would be over like land, territory. It would be after greed. It's like the narrative would just change. We would go to war like based on a lie, like with a 9/11. It would just get more and more creative. It's like there would be like all of these other reasons or like, well, Russia gates. It's kind of like how, Hillary Clinton seemed to want to go to war with Russia. It's kind of like, like people will have all of these excuses as to like why they want to go to war. And it's like, the left, they normally hate war. Anti-war is, associated with the left, but it's kind of like with Russia and whatnot, it's kind of like there are many people in love like, yeah, they seem to be pro-war actually. They seem to be, like, I don't know, war hawk, whatnot. It's like so the left went from being anti-war and being opposed to war, and it's like if you were opposed to war, it would make you left. But now it's kind of a lot like with Russia. There just seems to be many people on the left who do want to go to war.
Yeah, it's an odd thing. I mean, that somehow people think if you only do away with one thing, we're just one reform away from a peaceful world. We just get rid of this and we'll have global peace. I hear this all the time. You just do this and we'll have global peace. But it's, for example, I mean, like as far as the gods of the classical world go, I mean, they were almost not like gods at all. They were kind of like figures. They were like mythical, almost fictional figures that were very like us. They had their own willpower and they had their own desires, and of course they weren't really godlike at all. But I mean, you come forward to the like the unity of the one God, the Abrahamic God, and things like that, or the Reformation in Egypt where they started worshipping Amun instead of the Artemis and things like that. I don't know. I've heard a little bit about that. And then you have Richard Dawkins, coming out. We're all atheists about Zeus and Wotan, but we atheists, we just go one God further. And the thing about it is, like, a lot of these people say, oh yeah, but all we need is like the Marxist revolution and it'll all be all over. But look what's happened in the communist world. Look at the Sino-Soviet split. I think it was in the mid-60s. China fell out with Russia. And this was really, I was talking to a guy who lived in Romania at the time, and Romania was taking like the Chinese side as opposed to everyone else in Eastern Europe. and people were really scared. They thought this might go nuclear because China had nuclear weapons at the time, and so did Russia. So
how many times do we have to listen to the story saying, "Oh, but that wasn't real communism. That was something else." And I'm thinking, okay, look at the circumstances that were leading up to that. They're very, very similar. And with the far left, like I'm not seeing a libertarian socialism as what they're promising. Like I'm seeing like all these authoritarian aspects, really creeping out, and they're no longer sort of hidden. It's like it's blatantly a lot of it is authoritarian. I don't see how what they're planning now is going to be any different from what we saw in Soviet Russia or any of the other countries. It's still having the same precedents are still happening, like the same events that are leading up to that are still happening.
yeah, in a sense, it just goes to show that the left and the right can be very warlike at times, and we've seen I think in this particular age we're living in, we've seen a real extreme of leftist warlike behaviour, and if they had the ability, I think they would. These riots. Rin and I, in a previous talk show, we were talking about the slippery slope argument and about how, don't worry, it won't. It's only a few idiots on the streets, but I think the only reason it's not going any further is because they don't have the means right now. I think these people seem to be on a form. It's not even doesn't even seem to have a political purpose. It's almost a form of nihilistic destruction. It's rather like as riots tend to turn into quite quickly. I know some people are just there to loot, but you get people of all races have been affected by this. And how far, if for example, these people just went for hell bent for leather. Suppose Biden became president, and nothing was done, and there was this like a kind of tacit support. How much further would it go? Would it go to the point where there was literally some kind of new pogrom? It scares me, It scares me that there's no internal restraint to these people, and it scares me how easily people of all kinds can fall into that kind of mindset where they lose their minds. It's very frightening.
Oh yeah, I don't know if you guys could see this on screen share, but I made it this tweet some time ago, and I still stand by this. And it's kind of a lot like Christians, Satan and or demons are why people are shitty. Anti-deist, religion is the reason why people are shitty. Communist and or socialist, capitalism is the reason why people are shitty. Me, no, fuck all of you. People are just shitty in general. Stop using outside forces to explain it.
I like that's perfect.
Yeah, I think I think we're going to maybe we have a natural aggression as humans, which we cannot. It's part of our nature, which we can't ever lose or we can't get rid of. But what we can do is we can integrate it. We can understand that it exists, and we can find ways of dealing with it in a way which, in a adult and peaceful, or at least limiting our destructive power as much as possible. But it won't end. We can't do that until we understand that it is something inside us. We can't point fingers and just point at things outside us and say, as Rin was saying, just get rid of those things and everything will be fine. Those things are the problem. Whether it's capitalists or Jews or atheists or Muslims or Christians, it's all excuses and a way to try to explain away.
I totally agree with you, Ben. I totally agree with you. Like, if we get rid of just one little thing, we would have world peace. When really, I just find world peace, say pipe dreaming. It ignores human avarice, human greed. Like, we do go to war for money. We do go to war for land, for property. Like, we do go to war based off avarice. And I don't think that that's going to change because humans do have a greedy side to them.
Yeah, I think the closest we could. I don't think we could ever have a world without conflict, because we're going to get into conflict, and we are aggressive. We have an aggressive nature. The closest we can get to world peace is a world in which we find a way to deal with our own natures in a sensible and hopefully proper, in a way which doesn't lead to this kind of insanity. We keep our minds instead of losing them, basically. in this situation?
Yeah, I think uh, um shit, I lost my train of thought. Like I had a thought and then I lost, it's like went blank there.
Lonely Wolf, what do you reckon?
Well, even I mean, even when because when the really insidious parts of the protesters revealed, like there was actual footage of there were two people who were they'd gone to the RNC convention because they were part of the walkaway movement. They're people who sort of left the Democrat Party because they felt that it no longer really represented them. And these Black Lives Matter activists, because these two men were gay, and they were using like the F word, rhyming with maggot, and blatantly using that. And when you see that absolute hypocrisy, that really that ugly sort of behavior, like the excuse that I sometimes hear, like I've seen it a couple of times on Twitter when saying, "Oh, they must be right wing infiltrators." I'm thinking, really? It's like sounds like a very religious sort of thinking where you're thinking, okay, the devil has corrupted this movement because it can't be us; it must be them who've infiltrated us. Like that's such a flimsy sort of
It's
excuse.
It is the delusion of self-virtue, and this is something that several people talked about, and they're so right. Some people believe that they are on the side of, and this again, this is a very religious attitude you see with the left. They are on the side of the good. Everything they do is good, and that means, I wouldn't, I'd be absolutely not surprised at all if these were genuine leftists who decided to hurl homophobic abuse at these walkaway people because simply they felt justified to do it because these people had, in a sense, they'd gone over to the devil's side. To use. Let's use the
Hmm.
metaphor. Let's use that metaphor. They've gone over to the devil's side, although, of course, the left don't use that language, but that's what it's equivalent of in religious terms. And therefore, they had lost their humanity. Therefore, they were no longer
Hmm.
under the same code of conduct that a human being would be under.
Yeah, exactly. Like, like I've noticed this with J.K. Rowling, it's kind of like, I mean, I'm pretty sure we all remember how like 5 years ago, like the left was like, don't use the word bitch. Don't use the word bitch. It's a misogynistic slur. And if you say the word bitch, then you are a misogynist towards women. And they wanted to ban the word on Twitter. And if you were to say the word bitch, they would try to get your account, they'll try to flag your accounts down. And they even succeeded, like I noticed that more people are using it now, but it's like they actually succeeded, and there would be people who would get their Twitter accounts suspended because they said the word bitch was, and I always viewed it as concern trolling because like now, it's like J.K. Rowling is actually, I've seen that tweets or not, but somebody puts some graffiti on the wall saying J.K. Rowling is a bitch, and they're like, yeah, it's kind of like, well, the mask slips, so that's how you truly feel, or it's kind of like when Kevin Logan called Sean hit a cum bucket, it's like it's amazing, like how much the mask slips for their concern for women the moment the woman, is seen as being in disagreement, it's like, oh, I disagree. Oh, well, it's suddenly okay to be calling a woman a bitch, or it's like, as soon as a woman's the right winger, it's like, bitch, 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 bitch. It's like, wait a minute. 5 years ago, you're like, this is misogynist and you hate women. You hate women oh so much. And I love women. I would never, ever use that word ever because it's mean, it's rude, it's disrespectful. Women are robbed of their humanity. And as soon as it's, as soon as it's like J.K. Rowling's like, or any woman that they don't like, they use that word. Or even with black people in the N word, I've heard many, like with the news, I have read multiple news stories of Antifa calling black people the N word, like N word this, N word that, or using other racist slurs, like racist slurs for, Hispanic people. But it's always, like, okay, for example, there's this one news story where there was like this black person and a Hispanic person, who were in the military and they were wearing their like military uniform arms, and then like Antifa throwing things at them, and they call the black person the N word, and they call the Hispanic person the S word, and it's kind of like you will see all of these progressive types on Twitter, defending Antifa, because it's like they don't really care, like they don't really care. And again, it's like the mask slips, it's like don't use the N word until like the black guy works for the U.S. military, and when a black guy works for the military, then it's acceptable to use the N word, or how they would call black people coon, Uncle Tom, Sambo. Sometimes they call black people white supremacists or neo Nazis. They love dehumanizing black people. So try to disagree with agreeing with them, and they love and enjoy dehumanizing black people. So it's like all of their virtue signaling is just that. It's just virtue signaling. Like you don't really care about caring about black people. To me, that would be like caring about all of black people, including black people which you disagree. That would be like if there's a black person you disagree with, you still go like, what, we were still not going to use the N word. We're still are not going to use the Uncle Tom or Coon. But it's like, it's like as soon as a black, person disagrees, it's like, oh, the mass lips. We see just how racist you really truly are. Like
Yeah.
we see how racist you really truly are. And we know that you're just playing politics. You don't really care about black people.
Yeah. There's something really insidious about the current movement of the anti-racist activism. It's sort of a lot of these like corporate seminars are being, because it's a cynical ploy for money where you've got all these sort of diversity trainers who are coming into all these workplaces to do anti-racist workshop, and it's almost like a for example, like Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility, like because I read that book and it was probably the most cancerous thing. Like it seemed very to be talking down to everybody for white people and for black people, and to sort of make these stereotypes about black. So they talk about white supremacy, and one of the features of white supremacy is meritocracy, or working hard, or being on time, and they're characterizing these things as essentializing that as white culture, as opposed to black culture or whatever. It seems like really a regressive type of thing. And then with these type of diversity trainings, like they don't sort of necessarily put the workforce as a whole. They separate the white people. So okay, so the white people, you need to go to this particular workshop to learn about how racist you are and how complicit you are with white supremacy. And it's sort of telling that they don't include everybody in there. They only include white people because I think they're scared of having any sort of pushback from black people, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting how, I mean, maybe this is a learning experience for people like J.K. Rowling, who I think maybe she's going to come out against the left now, because she has essentially been on both sides of this now. She was part of the woke brigade, and as you said, Rin, she was making all the right noises, and then she says something which is unacceptable to them, and they turn on her with as much fury as they would on any of us. And she only deviated slightly. She deviated on the tea issue, which and then became like a turf, or said turf-like things, and that was it. She was cancelled. And cancellation doesn't just mean, what's it mean by cancel? This word cancellation, cancel culture. She's more than just kicked off Twitter or kicked off someone. I mean, she essentially becomes tarnished with immorality, and therefore it's okay. They thought that they know that you calling her names, calling her words that they would call. They said that people should be banned from social media for using. They'll do it. This is the hypocrisy you mentioned, Ren. It's the hypocrisy, and it's this kind of madness seems to be encouraged. I mean, what you said, Lonely Wolf, I've heard many, many times from people. I mean, I'm self-employed now, but there was a diversity course at my hospital which I never got to go on when I was a hospital porter. But it depends where you are. I know it's not so bad for me because I suppose I'm working class. But if you go to university, this is continuous. The kind of thing is continuous. And I don't know if it's deliberate. I've heard some people say it was the Frankfurt School, it's the Fabian Society, it's Common Purpose. I don't know if you have Common Purpose in outside Britain. I know it exists in Britain. But it seems to be, they seem to want to build hatred up on people. And I mean, I don't know what kind of person you are, Lonely Wolf, but it depends on who. The experience of it is very different. Rin, as a black woman, would be encouraged to hate others. I, as a white man, would be encouraged to hate myself. Both, I don't know which is worse, quite frankly, and both are equally destructive, and they make people miserable. They make people miserable. They make them resentful. They demoralize them.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's just that the frame sometimes it freezes. Like
I noticed.
I thought you were. Yeah. It sometimes it freezes, and it's like I thought you were done because it just freezes.
You're free. Yeah, you do freeze occasionally.
And it looked like
I'm done. Sorry, I'm done.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't, deliberately cut you off in the middle of talking, but sometimes you freeze, and you freeze at a stopping point too. So it's kind of like I was under the impression that you were through, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of a lot like, it's kind of like I do think that the mainstream media radicalizes people, like they normally do take the side of the protesters. Like, even, it's kind of like I've seen this video clip where there's this protester, protester who was like, she was complaining about her black lesbian democratic mayor, for real. Like, it was a black protester, and she was complaining about her black lesbian democratic mayor, and she gave her mayor a death threat. Like she basically threatened to kill her mayor. And it's kind of like okay, and it's kind of like I do wonder at what points would a Democratic Party would be like, okay, we're tired of pandering to you. At what point do they grow tired of pandering to the left? Because it's like, how genuine do I think most Democrats are? Not really. Don't really view it. It's kind of like it's well known that they have their public face and their private face. Publicly, they say one set of things, and privately, they say like the opposite set of things. They'll tell, voters one thing, then they'll tell their donors another thing, or, it's like it's so known that they do this, or, it's kind of like when they travel from state to states, they may tell, a rural society, this or more, conservative areas, one set of things, but it was tell a more liberal, people another set of things.
Yeah, it's I think it's interesting how the mayor, who probably thought she was completely safe because she ticked all the boxes, black, lesbian, she ticks the race box, the sex box, and the sexual orientation box, which I think Douglas Murray would say she's on the gold medal position of the victimhood Olympics, he would say. But if she says something wrong, for example, the tea issue or something like that, if she just needs to put one foot wrong, and Peter Tatchell, who's a leftist himself, has become quite a critic of all this, because he says it's one strike and you're out. You just say the wrong thing about one thing, and you are immediately cast out, and you're essentially put in the same camp as everyone else. So you'll be hung up there with Richard Spencer and Sargon and everyone else. And these people, these radical SJWs, they don't understand the difference between any of them. I mean, if people talk about the alt-right and the alt-lights. Well, as far as they're concerned, Sargon and like Millennial Woe is like the same person, as far as they're concerned, even though one is distinctly alt-right and the other is alt-right. One's a civic nationalist, the other's an ethno-nationalist. But as far as they're concerned, they're all Nazis. Everyone to the right of Mao Zedong is a Nazi.
I know. I know, it's kind of like, it's kind of a lot like they think everybody's a Nazi. They would think ANCAPs are Nazi. They would think, lib censors Nazi. They think, neoliberals are Nazis. They think TERFs are Nazis. It's like, if you are a TERF, you are a Nazi. It's kind of
Cool.
like, okay, or there be like socialist, right? Or they'll be like communists. And even though they're socialist or communist, because they're not woke enough and because they're not progressive enough, it's like Nazi. It's like, wait a minute, you think that a socialist is Nazi? It's like, you're actually gonna call like a socialist a Nazi or a communist a Nazi? It's like, just how far left are you? Just
And
how
the
far
way
left.
they talk about the word violence, and they use it loosely to fit their own needs because, I remember there was somebody, I think it was Rand Paul or something like that, was attacked by and just abused the hell out of them, like just trying to walk across the street with his wife, and he was accosted by all these protesters or whatever, and really terrorized or whatever, and then was obviously distressed about that and went to Twitter about that. And then a trans activist said, "Where are your scars? Like, so show pictures of the physical injuries." And so they're saying that, violence means you have to actually punch somebody and you have to have bruises. But yet these are the same people who say, words of violence. So misgendering a trans person is an act of violence. And so I'm thinking, okay, where is this double standard coming from?
Yeah, it's like, I know. It's like words are violence, and if you like misgender, a trans person, you have killed that trans person. And some of these exact same people would misgender me all day long. It's like they would be the very first people to call me by he/him pronouns. It's like, well, wait to be a hypocrite. Or these would be the very exact same people who would love to call Blair White by he/him pronouns. And not only would they call Blair White by he/him pronouns, they would also, even go like really below the belt. Like they would talk about her private parts and graphic details. Like they obviously have no idea what it looks like, but they know that she has since gotten bottom surgery. So they would go on and on and on about her private area. And it's kind of a lot like, it's like, words are violence, and, misgendering trans people is the exact same thing as murdering trans people. Then they would turn right around and misgender Blair White and talk about how she didn't have bottom surgery. They would just go on and on about her private area. And it's like, wow, this is extremely hypocritical, very, very, very hypocritical, to the point it's kind of a lot like, okay, it's all of this censorship, just for power, because it's like you do realize that, like anybody, like now that, you've put the censorship there, that your tweets could be, flagged down. You do realize that, people could start flagging your tweets for misgendering other people, like, now that you put those rules, there.
I think it proves that George Orwell was right. He was right more than 70 years ago. He said this is what would happen. In George Orwell's world, in the world of his fiction, there's the slogan of INGSOC, the party that rules the world: war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. And there was a ministry of truth which creates lies. And the ministry of truth, everything changes. Newspapers are continuously edited, not just today's newspaper, but newspaper archives. Statues are continuously. It's funny you mentioned statues. Statues are continuously removed and replaced. Now we see that, don't we? We have in Animal Farm, there's the phrase, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And there's so much more, any examples I could give you, but those two books in particular, Animal Farm is primarily about Russia and the Soviet Union. 1984 is more about the world in general, but both of them so encapsulate in so many different ways the kind of world we're living in now, as Orwell predicted. I mean, not because I believe he was a fortune teller, but because he was very clever. He could see the way politics was going. He was also very close to the Fabian Society, and maybe he'd been in secret meetings when they said, "Look, this is what we're going to do, guys." Later on, in a few years' time, but I do really think those books should be read, and to coin a phrase, make Orwell fiction again.
Yeah, it's kind
I
of,
think there are some comments in the live stream.
yeah, I
Oh yeah,
saw it, but it seems like trolling to me. Or at least I read it as trolling because it's like if you want to see people doing contradictory things, you could just go on Twitter for that. But it's like,
Yeah,
it's like it just seemed
that's what
like
they're
this
criticizing
should
for us, because they say that we're talking about Twitter people, like not mainstream people. Well, okay, mainstream, like let's talk about the MSNBC and the CNN, how because that's part of like why we're in this situation at the moment, because the level of dishonesty they've had, because I'm someone who's like more on the left than I would be on the right. Like I'd be in support of the Democrat Party, like if, despite all its flaws or whatever, I'd still sort of, if let's say that I was an American citizen, I would vote for Joe Biden. So, I'm probably the most leftist out of this group or whatever. But the problem was like it set itself up for failure because the media itself, the number of lies, it's like first off is that that guy wearing a MAGA hat, Nick Sandman, like the Covington kid, like the number of lies that were fabricated around him. And then and the RNC, like cleverly, like they use that, like putting him as a guest speaker is like a genius act. Like, not that I like Donald Trump or I want him re-elected, that's the last thing I want, but at the same time, like the RNC, they were clever at having those people who'd been sort of lied about, and sort of later vindicated, like to have them on the stage to sort of to really expose some of the dishonesty from that, like that mainstream media. And as an example of an individual saying contradictory things, so I'll answer like the person in the chat. So like a prominent trans activist, Charlotte Clymer, um, is the response was there was someone who was a like those two people, like an elderly couple. One was Rand Paul, and I think that's his name. Like him and his wife were accosted by a group of protesters, and then you know, this trans woman, Charlotte Clymer, said, oh, well, I want to see the physical injuries before I believe this. And I'm saying, okay, but these are the same people, like in that trans activist community, who say that, words are violence or whatever. So that's enough for them to consider violence. But yet, at the same time, they're seeing someone that's opposed to them saying, well, okay, I want to see evidence of violence. I need to see the bruises or whatever. So that's like the essential contradiction that I'm seeing.
and no one said that about Jesse Smollett, who was a man who faked his own hate crime, I believe. And in fact, when it turned out that Jesse Smollett had in fact done that, the response from the left was simply to stop talking about it. They simply just went quiet about the whole thing. So there's no acknowledgement that they made an error. There was no acknowledgement that Smollett had done something very bad. And that to me is an example of what we're talking about, Lonely Wolf. And again, it's very Orwellian. It's not lies when you tell a falsehood about someone bad. It's not violence when you do something to someone very bad. It's Orwell again. It's the word changes its meaning. It's newspeak, he called it, where in the book 1984 there was a new language that was introduced, newspeak, where it was like English, but all the words had different meanings. There was as fewer words as possible, so people couldn't express themselves properly, and it became impossible to think outside what the party demanded, the Ingsoc party. And so there was this thing called black white or doublethink, which allowed a person to hold two logically contradictory or ethically contradictory views at the same time, which is exactly what we're seeing. But, beat up, people use violence against Rand Paul. They either don't believe it or they say it's justified. Someone else uses no violence at all. Well, they're using hate speech, which is worse than physical violence. It depends who you are, whether you're a good person, whether you're tarnished with this, again, coming back to religion, this demonic smear of evil, or whether you are a man or woman of God and therefore have full human rights. It's dismaying to see. And I wish it wasn't happening. I'd like to find a solution, a cure.
or back to people doing contradictory things. I mean, look at Alyssa Milano, her response to Kavanaugh versus her response to Joe Biden. Both Brett Kavanaugh and Joe Biden, have, sexual allegations, but she would go from believe all women and listen and believe, and then she would, and Alyssa Milano could be found in a Kavanaugh hearing, glaring, with this creepy glare at Brett Kavanaugh, just to do a 180 when it comes to Joe Biden. Or there is like Nancy Pelosi, same thing when it comes to, Nancy Pelosi. She also went from believe all women, listen and believe, to like doing a 180 when it comes to Joe Biden. It's kind of like, or, think about Hollywood when it comes to, Harvey Weinstein. It's like you can see photos of Oprah Winfrey kissing Harvey Weinstein. You could see, Michelle Obama. I think Michelle Obama could also kissing Harvey Weinstein. You see all of these contradictions. Or it's kind of like I think Hillary Clinton, called, Jeffrey Epstein, like a really good friend, but she's also a feminist. It's like it's kind of a lot like that's the reason why I thought that the person was just trolling. It's like a troll question because there's like so many numerous examples. So that, like look at all of these numerous examples, like Alyssa Milano, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton. It's kind of like such as viewed like, oh, it's just a troll trying to, fish for gotchas.
Actually, he or she has like said something good. So it says, yeah, a lot of this definitely makes sense and it's worth talking about. Oh, so that's good. Well, at least like it was worthwhile clarifying in this case. I just feel it's like people take tweets too seriously rather than politicians' actual policies, etc.
Yeah, I must apologise. Actually, I've only just seen I had it on the private chat tab, so I've only just seen these comments. But there are some interesting ones here, and I appreciate everyone watching. I really, really do. And I didn't know that you say diversity training is not a regular thing at university. It's a 1 hour thing at orientation, maybe certain departments, but it's not been your experience at all. Okay, well, I must admit I've not been to university, so I'm going by secondhand information. If that's what you had, then obviously 1 hour is not going to warp your mind forever. So that's great. But I've heard other things.
I think it's the faculty more so than the students, and especially in companies as well. It's becoming more and more a thing in companies because of the idea of that whole thing, that white fragility training is like a big thing, and that in itself is a really bizarre concept because it's a very flawed ideology. Because I read this book and then it's being distributed to so many workplaces, and it's I read the book itself and it was just full of like one internal contradiction after another, and it was really, to summarize this book, I think it's the neurotic said the racial neurotics of one particular woman who takes her experience saying, okay, these are the examples of the times when I was racist, and then she goes from I and then she extrapolates that to we. So she tries to sort of project her own, neurotic views on race. And if you sort of read that book, it's like it puts this sense of paranoia in the mind that like, yeah, there are situations where we have to be careful of what we do. Like if we're in a professional setting, then we have to behave ourselves in a certain way, and there are power dynamics or whatever. But at the same time, it's like it's almost as if every single interaction you have, like any cross-racial interaction, it could be like friends or it could be family or in-laws. It's like the way that she presents is that every interaction that you have that's cross-racial is filled with this, underlying racism and supremacy, and all these internal biases are there, and it's a power dynamic that's there. And if people internalize that whole thing, then it's just going to make a bunch of white people extra neurotic when it comes to race, and that makes it harder for everyone because people aren't going to have that sense of unity when there's that constant it just takes away the authenticity of cross-cultural friendships when people peddle that sort of rhetoric.
Yeah, I've not actually read this book, but I've heard the phrase white fragility before. I mean, Kevin Logan and Christy Winters often bring it up, and they tend to use it for like Sargon of Akkad or another white person who gets annoyed that that somebody's sort of woke scolding them or something like that, and they say, "Oh, you're just suffering from white fragility" or something like that. Which again, it's a double standard. But what you've described is extremely disturbing. It does again. It brings us back to George Orwell in 1984, where thought criminals, which is a word he coined, have to confess their thought crimes publicly. And indeed, this actually happened during the in the Stalin era in the Soviet Union, where dissidents would actually be tortured until they just sat in front of a camera and they would just record everything, all their dissident thoughts, every bad thought they had against the state, and they'd say, "I'm very, very sorry. I'm a," I don't know if they used the word thought criminal in Russian, but they would do this, and then they would be shot. Then they'd just be shot. And of course, it was only because they'd been tortured for so long, mentally and physically, that they would do this. And it's like we're entering that world where you have this sort of confession thing. I've seen people doing this in the streets during the riots. They will, like, those who support it, the white people who support it, will kneel down and they say, "I was racist here, I was racist there. I'm a racist and I don't know it." That's another thing. Or
oh god, yeah, that's
yeah. How can you be racist and not know it? I've never understood that. It's you have like and then of course you atone for your sins. Again, we're coming back to a religion, aren't it? By becoming a nice white male like Kevin Logan, who likes feminism and thinks and all this sort of thing, and supports the BLM riots and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think Christie is a bit more on because I think they have a bit of a difference their opinions are quite different, because when Christie does her shows on her own, because I actually know her a little bit, like, behind the scenes. Like, we've had ups and downs. There's times where, like, I wasn't talking to her and we were mutually blocked, but at the moment we're kind of on good terms, and she's kind of against that, that all cops are bad rhetoric, and the looting and rioting and because basically at the moment she's saying, okay, I just want us to win. Like, I just want the Democrats to win, and all these strategies are just losing strategies, like all these sort of protests or whatever. So she seems a lot more of a probably more centrist or center left, I think, than I think Kevin would be a little bit further on the left, because he was more into the Bernie Sanders.
They had an argument, I remember, about it once. It was Kevin was quite distressed by it, but because Christie has a very dim view of Bernie Sanders, because she says he's a bit of an opportunist when it comes to loyalty to the party. He often leaves and rejoins, and sometimes he runs as an independent, and she didn't like that. She's very much a party Democrat, but these it's interesting listening to them. Despite my disagreements with them, I do find them interesting, and I think I saw you. It was were you on their show? You were on with the Angry Aussie once, weren't you, Lonely Wolf? I remember you did a show with the Angry Aussie.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, I saw you on with that. Yeah, that's why I saw you. But I do find these people interesting to listen to, because some of them are more sensible than others. Some of them are more stable than others, and some of them do act as a kind of anchor in the storm, I think, for some of the more extreme ones.
Yeah, because at the moment, like, Christie's like the only one of those people, like those YouTubers left, who's making any kind of sense. Like, she'd probably actually be agreeing with, like, a lot of things. Well, okay, I think she'd agree with more or less me, because I'm sort of more on the Democrat side, more on the leftist side or whatever. But I do have, like, a number of problems with the left that I'm trying to reconcile, and it's just the very extreme parts of the left that I'm sort of thinking it's kind of dragging a lot of people down.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, MM says got to go. So, but thanks MM for your comments. That's much appreciated. Appreciate that. It's really interesting. I'm sorry I only just saw the comments. Is Rin still there? She gone off. I think Rin's gone.
Oh, can you
you're
hear
right,
me? Can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Thought you might have gone off.
Well, what was happening was, like, I was looking into my book, because it's like it's part of the discussion, but it's like I guess I could just read the text aloud, I guess, but didn't there be too much of it to read? Alternatively, I guess I could just take screenshots and post the screenshots somewhere, because there's just too much to read. But yeah, and I was just trying to see if there's some way that I could
What book is this?
Oh, the book I had is called "Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me."
All right, I've not heard of that one.
And Ren and I, we have our favorite. We're kind of at odds with this channel. What's his name? It's called Takedown MRAs. Like it's this Australian dude. He's like a male feminist, and he absolutely hates the men's rights movement or whatever. And it's like I think we'd both been quote tweeted by him, and like it didn't affect me, but when Ren got like quote tweeted by him, it was like there was a lot of followers who were going after her, and some of them said, "Oh, you're not really a black woman," and I was like, "Oh my god," it was just so hateful.
Oh dear, that's again. It's like they sort of like turning against their own professed principles. But that's interesting. I mean, it sounds like what the channel you just described reminds me of Kevin Logan and his Descent of Manosphere. He goes,
Yeah, well, at least Kevin can call it what it is, the manosphere, whereas this takedown MRA, it's like everything that's negative, like they take incels, they take the pickup artists, the MGTOW, like everything that's like they describe as a manosphere, and just says these are MRAs, and it's like, do you even know what you're talking about? I mean, these like whatever they're called manosphere things, like they've got different things, and they actually disagree with each other because the MGTOWs and the MRAs, they hate each other.
yeah, I noticed that. I think Michael Remedia said, "Oh, MGTOWs are a bunch of." He said a rude word I won't repeat on Lynn's channel, but I mean, I myself find the MGTOWs extremely depressing to listen to. I find I can only
Tinfoil
put up
hat.
so long. You know, they're just so miserable. I mean, they say, "Oh, it's a no, MGTOW's a positive thing," and I says, I can't I can't see any positivity in it. I mean, they sound lonely, depressed, damaged people, and of course, I mean, Kevin is extreme. I know what you mean about Kevin being more extreme than Christie, because Kevin actually said something about Roosh V. I mean, I don't like. I can't stand Roosh V, to be honest. I mean, I think he's a nasty piece of work. But Kevin said, "Oh, I hope he gets abused in jail as he goes to jail, and the other prisoners sexually abuse him and stuff like that." And Christie pulled him up on that. She said, "You shouldn't say that."
I'm glad, yeah, because that's like because they define that as because even if you're talking about male victims of rape or whatever, that fit like when you say comments like that, that's part of what they call rape culture.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean, Christie does seem to be more, I think, level-headed than Kevin. I must say, you know, in that respect, she seems to be more aware of that sort of thing. I mean, it's Kevin's. I think Kevin just. I don't think he really meant it, but he just sort of says these things out of off the top of his head. You know.
Yeah, but back what you're saying earlier, like yeah, it's quite weird. Like, it's like I've been through this like many times with the far left on Twitter where they keep calling me a white man, and it's so like ironic, like it was two times with takedown MRAs, they misgendered me. It's like, aren't you guys supposed to feel bad about misgendering me? But and it's to go against their own principles when it comes to like misgendering. Like misgendering is bad and it's traumatizing.
Yeah, you should have
But
called them turfs. That'll scare them off because that's the last thing they want to be. Because that's like if you get called a turf, you're being tarred with a really big feather.
Yeah, that does seem to be the taboo thing nowadays. But it's incredible. Do they say that even when they can see you, Ren? I mean, you do put pictures of yourself out there.
yes, like there are pictures of myself on Twitter, but it's like when I got quote tweeted by Takedown MRS twice, they just kept calling me a turf. I'm not turf, but they kept calling me a white man and stuff. They never ever called me a turf. That's the one thing that they never called me, but they did keep calling me a white man, and that was like, it's like, aren't you going against your own morals? Aren't your own principles?
Yeah, I mean, male feminists, they're probably my least favorite of all of the, because I mean, I've got friends who identify as feminists, and they're quite sensible or whatever, but sometimes it's like the male like feminists or the ones who like they turned out to be really, in so many cases, they just turn out to be so creepy because like I've gotten inbox from a number of people who are in feminist groups, and then they like they were sort of romantically involved, or they had an interest in like one of their fellow feminists who happened to be a man. And then I got these inbox saying like this dude is being really creepy or whatever. And then it was also like very deceitful in some of their ways. Like she had a crush on some other guy and was seeing him, and then this other male feminist comes along and says, "No, sorry, like you don't want to go out with that guy because that guy is gay." And so he made up that story just to deter her from going with someone else. And I thought, that's disgusting. You're being homophobic and you're also being a misogynist.
Yeah, that sounds like, again, it's if people don't practice universal ethics like and standards, if they don't, in other words, if they become hypocrites and they start turning against their own standards in certain situations, I think it's a sign. It takes us back to what we were talking about earlier. It's a sign that that person has a limited view of human, in the religious sense, almost as in the secular form of that. That there are the men of God and the men of the devil. There are the Israelites and there's the Canaanites and things like that. It's because this person says something like this or holds this particular view, and it's this narcissism of small differences which we have today. It doesn't have to be a particularly radically different view to yourself. If you're one of these people, they enter that dark land, that dark realm of evil, and then all gloves are off, and all the ethical standards which you normally uphold to people within your own tribe now go out the window, and you have a completely different standard. You can treat these people in ways you could never treat your members of your own tribe.
Yeah, because I think it's best like to put on because I try to put myself in the best light when it comes to being public or whatever. I mean, so okay, sometimes my Twitter feed, like I've got memes there that have kind of that people might not like very much. It's they're kind of a bit spicy or whatever, but by the same token, like I pretty much admit to the like if I'm presenting myself on my channel, like I just say, look, I'm not really one of those people to be judgmental about this person or that person, because I know myself that that I'm not the most racially sensitive person in the world. Like I've laughed at a lot of jokes that would probably get frowned upon if it's like Family Guy or whatever. Because I think I said that to Rin like last time we spoke. Like, yeah, like I think that I could easily be labeled as being casually racist, but I just sort of it's easy to just put it out there and just say, yeah, this is what I do, and I say things that'll get me into trouble or whatever. But that's how I am, and that way I can't really be caught. Like nobody can just look through my Twitter feed saying, "Oh, I've got him," because I've already put it out there.
It's actually incredible that you mentioned comedy and humor, because humor is something I think very important. It's certainly essential for my psychological well-being, because the ability to laugh at things and to find humor in things it's a way, in a sense, of it's a way of dealing with bad subjects. A lot of humor is about things that were not funny, in other words, and you can't make jokes about many things nowadays that you could make a long time ago. And I mean, a lot of the most popular comedy series in my country are comedies like Faulty Towers and things like that, which you wouldn't be able to make them nowadays. And there's films like Airplane, which is I think from the early 80s, which have those two jive talking guys in, which is absolutely hilarious. I love that film. You couldn't make that nowadays. And in dealings with people, I mean, on the personal level, you mentioned like when you're with friends and you have difficulty dealing with people. It is getting to the point, I think, where you're sitting down with somebody and you're wondering what the hell is it okay to say, and will they accept it all right? And I mean, I think this is where we get into the realm of where you police your own thoughts, and you police your own thoughts and your own words when you, in a sense, become, as Orwell said, it's like he has that talk with Parsons in prison. I don't know if you've read the book, but he says, and Parsons says,
yes.
he says, I'm a thought criminal. I didn't know it. My son told me. And it turns out his kid is like completely loyal to Big Brother because he's a child. He's grown up in this state. And it does tend to be the younger these people are, the worse it is. It's destroying relationships. It's destroying friendships. It's breaking down what should be the bonds between individual members of who should be a social species. We can't. We are a social species. We live like other
Yeah,
primates.
totally. Oh, I'm sorry for
Sorry.
interrupting again. The everything freezes. It's kind of like the screen freezes, and it looks like that you stop talking. It's like I didn't mean to
Not a problem.
interrupt, but it's just under the impression when the screen freezes, and it just looks like you were done. But yeah, I totally and completely agree with you. It's like but where I'm from, I mean, many people don't really like social justice. Like, again, there are more and more black people complaining, because, like, again, like, I think it's like this right here. It's like, as you can see, like, I am a black woman, but they keep calling me like a white man. But I also have another friend that's black, and I actually have few friends that are black that have been called white. It's like, it's kind of like. But if I were to show you a picture of my friend, it's like it's clearly a black person, but it's like you must be a white man. You must be a white man, and it's kind of like nobody wants to be misracialized. Like when you call a black person white, what you don't get is that you're being mean, you're being rude, you're being very disrespectful. It's really an ugly and nasty thing to do. And it makes you like no better than the alt right.
It,
Makes you no better than the alt-right because it's such an ugly nasty thing. It's like a white person. It's like a white person, of all it's calling me a white and you to shame me and all that, but my friends, been, through a similar situation, and I think that you see more and more black people getting tired of the left. More like when I go to Twitter, you see more and more black Trump supporters like these days. Like I'll see more and more black people coming out like, yeah, I support Donald Trump now. It's like, because like the left is infuriating, they're frustrating. They'll say, shut up and listen. But they don't actually listen to black people. They listen to white people that agree with them. At most, they would just have that one black person that they agree with, and it's usually like Cat Black. Like he was just a Cat Black, and then that's like the only black person to listen to. Other than that, they would like listen to Vosh. You know, they used to like Destiny. They don't seem to like Destiny that much anymore. But it's like they like ContraPoints, but then ContraPoints set a Book Angel on her channel. But it's kind of a lot like it's like they for the most part they pretty much exclusively listen to white people. The only black person that listens Cat Black, and when you only listen to one black person, it does make that person look like you're a token black person because you don't like listen to a wide range of black people. Like listening to black people isn't listen to that one black person you that agrees with you. Listening to black people would be like listening to a wide range of black people.
I've certainly, maybe because I'm working class, I suppose. So I haven't been educated beyond like senior schools, beyond secondary school, and I was a hospital porter. But I think maybe I've been sheltered from a lot of what other people have to experience. Maybe middle class people who have live in a different culture, but there was this kind of problem didn't really happen much, certainly not as much as it seems to from what I hear since I've been online. I mean, for example, there was a black porter at my hospital whose name was Robert. He was an old man and he had white hair, and we called him Guinness. That was his nickname because he's
Yeah,
black with a white top. And everyone called him this, and they called him to his face, and he even used that name to refer to himself sometimes, and nobody minded. Nobody objected. No one considered it offensive that we called him that. We simply called him that because he was a black with a white top, like Guinness,
yeah.
like the drink. And so, but the thing is, I suppose that if that happened nowadays, certainly if you're in the presence of someone like senior management, the person, if they caught you doing that, even if Guinness himself didn't object, even if Guinness defended you, you'd probably be out on your ear.
Yeah, and it's probably like a white HR person would come in there and scold everybody.
Yeah.
Most black people I talk to find it. Sorry, Ren. Most black people I talk to find it very patronising. They find political correctness very patronising.
Yeah, I've seen Sargon of Akkad, talk about it, where I think I might have gotten the story wrong because the story is like from 2015, but it would be like a white guy would call his black best friend the N word, and the black best friend would call him. Oh, I think I could say this on YouTube Cracker, because Cracker could be a snack, but the black friend would be like, "Oh, you my cracker." The white guy would be like, "You my N word," and it's kind of like they just had that relationship, and this happened in England. That what I know for sure. It happened in England, where the white guy got fired, for calling the black person the N-word. Now, the black person came to his defense, like, no, 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 that's my friend. But even though the black person actually came to the white person's defense, that didn't matter. The white person who got offended on his behalf mattered than the black person themselves.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's really patronizing.
What's more, the black person who defended his friend, you could bet that someone would have made a note of his name, and he would have ended up, as I think Candace Owens has described this quite well. He'd end up on the sort of blacklist. That is a black person who's not in line with what the way black people are meant to think.
Yes, so and white people still like white supremacy because white people are still have power over black people. Black people don't have their own sense of personal agency. It's like it would be different if the black person complained themselves. But it's like when a black person's like coming to the defense of the white person's like, hey, 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 that's my friend. I do not want him fired. That's my friend. I gave him my permission, but it's like, oh, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And it's like it's really, really dumb.
I know that in Lonely Wolf, I know in Australia that maybe it's slightly different. I know I know swearing is more acceptable socially in Australia, not like these taboo racial words, but general bad language. You call someone F this C word thing.
Yeah.
I spent a couple of months in Australia and I found this myself.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, because my rule of thumb is like I'm not automatically going to use that word when I meet somebody for the first time. Usually I'll wait for them to use that word, or I'll say, God, I think that person's a C word, and then they'll say what the word is, and then you got that comfort, and then you both just keep saying that word over and over again, and we're really bad, and our meaning of the C word is not the same, because I've heard some videos where people call it out saying that it's a sexist slur or whatever, but the reality is, in Australia, like you're more likely to be called a C word as a male than you are as a female. Like we wouldn't necessarily. I think they're real fighting words. If we said that against a woman, like that'd be really, really fighting words. But just to say that to a man, you'd just be like, that's just a normal everyday thing. And even it's like a term of endearment, like between men, they call each other the C word, just as almost like it's the word mate or something.
It's interesting actually that this is when you talk about language that these words, these taboo words, these four-letter words with short vowels and hard consonants, which we're all familiar with. Firstly, they're very ancient words. They've remained unchanged for generations. And different countries, different English-speaking countries see them in different ways. So, for example, in the United States, it's very different indeed, where you swear it has different words have different weights. This can sometimes be a little bit embarrassing because I think the Americans made a comedy film, a James Bond spoof called The Spy Who Shagged Me, with ifs, when it came over to Britain, they had to blank out the shag word because it's a much rude. I don't think the Americans really understood because it's a British term. They didn't understand exactly how much weight that word carried. The different, I think, what you find with the sort of like the Orwellian language is, firstly, it's pretty much identical all over the world. So it's almost like it's imposed on each English-speaking country by people who essentially who have the same agenda. And secondly, they change quite regularly. These words change quite regularly. For example, Martin Luther King used to refer to black people using a word I don't think you could even say on YouTube now. It's not the NN word. It's just another word that begins with N, which has the same Latin root. It comes from the word black, which means black. Yet he would say that he was a black man who stood up for black people. That then changed to something else. It was then colored people. Then it was people of color.
Yeah.
It's like they're changing every so often. Just they're trying to keep us on our toes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
What I do
it's
is
the
that
word
I call.
of.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Everything's
my
lagging a bit.
computer freezes.
You're
Yeah.
you're not coming through very well. Your video's lagging a bit.
Yeah, I freeze. Well, the screen freezes for me often, and so it's kind of like it makes communication more difficult. I mean, I think it would be like more, smoother if we were all like in the same room with each other, or if there's a better connection on my end. But my connection isn't all that good. But for me, what I do is that I call that the Spanish in a word. Like I don't think we could say it on YouTube. Like if you say it on YouTube, I'm quite sure that there's gonna be that one person who gets like really, really angry, and just gonna flag it. And so it's like it's easier to just call it the Spanish in a word. It- it- it's just weird.
I notice other languages have the same kind of like newspeak reforms. English, of course, English has three genders. We have male, female, and neuter, but we refer to inanimate objects by the neuter gender always, apart from with a few exceptions like ships are called she. But apart from that, everything is like it. Whereas Spanish, for example, has, as you know, because I know you've been learning it, Rin, Spanish is a two-gender language. Everything is either he or she. And as there are inflections in the words, and it's the same with French. It's the same with all the Romance language. Actually, you have inflections in the words depending on what gender that word is, and talking about not people, talking about inanimate objects, and they're trying to change it so that, for example, you don't have Latino and Latina, you have Latinx. So they've taken the gender out of that word.
Oh, many, countless, Hispanics are actually very angry about that. I don't know if you've noticed that on Twitter, but I mean, I follow some Mexicans, and when I follow Mexicans, they are like extremely angry at the progressive community for Latinx. They call it like what's it, Western imperialism. I think they call it Western imperialism because it's like it's usually white progressives. It's usually very white. It's like Elizabeth Warren type progressives. White could be, and it's like Latin X, and you have all of these people who are actually Hispanic, people from Mexico, angry because it's kind of like it's a very gendered language, and it's kind of a lot like if if you like replace well, it's like how are they supposed to speak? It's like how are they supposed to speak? It's like a tormenta is storm, tormento is torment. Kind of a lot like if you just took the last letter away. Well, how do you know if a person's saying storm or torment? It's tormento, it's torment. Tormenta is storm. They need the A or O at the end to know what you're saying.
Because essentially it's the same noun which has a masculine and feminine nature, and the masculine and feminine nature are essential to the meaning of the word. This is exactly what Newspeak is in the book 1984. They take the language and they engineer it as if it's an object or a sculpture, and language has always developed naturally. It's something that's evolved, like in the way that life evolves. And I feel passionately about letting it evolve, maybe because I'm a writer myself. So I love language. I think it's a wonderful thing. It's something that possibly I mean, I know whales and dolphins might have a complex spoken language, it's often thought, but it's something that very few animal species can do. And we're one of perhaps only a handful of animal species on Earth who can do this, who can communicate complex ideas through sound. So please leave it alone. Let it be. It's like
Please
someone wants
respect it. It's
to.
yeah, that's what I mean. That's why the German, that's the hardest thing about learning German. I mean, Japanese is the one that I'm a little bit better at, but German, I'm only at the very beginning stages. It's like the idea that there's three different types of objects. It's the die, der, and das, and then it turns out that a knife and a fork and a spoon, they've got three different genders.
You got to call it he, she, or it. Yeah, it's.
Yeah,
I'm curious to see exactly what kind of manipulation is happening in other languages with different types of grammar. But it seems to, again, it's something that I don't know, you can actually go where this doesn't happen. I mean, almost every corner of the earth seems to be covered by kind of some kind of plot which is doing this. It's worrying. I don't like it. I think it's like someone wants to change the world. They want to change us. They want to change us into something unnatural.
It seems like they have more free speech in Japan than we do in the United States. You know, and I know that it's kind of like if I were to switch, and you say Japanese word, I could, get away saying something in Japanese that I wouldn't normally get away with saying in English.
Hello, Onslow, by the way. Onslow is in chat. I know Onslow. How are you?
okay. I've never met Onslow before, probably because I'm like this. I'm the new one.
I
feel excluded because he said like Ben Hey, Rin Hey, and it's like, what about me? Am I chopped liver? No, probably because
come on, Onslow. Say hello to Lowly Wolf. He's part of my
hello to me too.
Yeah, he's part of my crowd.
No, it's just that also I assume, he's a huge fan of Ben Porter, and I was on Ben's channel before, so I think he recognizes me from being in Ben's channel because this is the very first time I've seen Onslow. But he probably seen me on Ben's channel.
Yeah, it'll be nice to you when he gets to know you, Lonely Wolf. Don't worry.
I love the name Onslow.
It's it was from a comedy. It was from a comedy, wasn't it?
Yeah, Keeping Up Appearances.
I love that. I wonder if that would be banned now. I wonder because it was very funny.
For its classism.
Yeah, I mean, what I've done is I've been getting the DVDs of several things. I got the DVD of Gone with the Wind. I got the DVD of Faulty Towers, and I don't know specifically. I know that they've been banned from some outlets. I've just grabbed them just in case, because I don't want to lose these things. I really don't want to lose them. But hopefully, hopefully, this madness will be over before they completely go down the memory hole. I don't know.
Onslow and Rose. What's it called?
Wasn't it Onslow and Daisy? Like Onslow was married to Daisy, and then Rose was Daisy's sister.
I know they were named after flowers, and then there was the granddad, and there was Richard and Hyacinth.
Yeah,
but I think it was classist. I mean, I hate using that word, but it was a class-based comedy. Like a lot of traditional English comedy is about class. It's based around class. Like George and Mildred is essentially a class. There's lots of class jokes because it's like posh people interacting with the working class, and there's lots of comedic value from that. But I've not seen a comedy made since about 1995 that has really made me laugh, with the exception of Little Britain, which seems to be an aberration. It's an island of sanity and joy in an ocean of cultural Marxist cesspools and things. Oh, it's like...
because Keeping Up Appearances, because that's just like that was probably one of my favorite British shows. I don't know whether you've ever seen that show or not. It's like it's kind of a class divide. Like there's this woman Hyacinth, like married to this guy Richard, and she's very, very posh. Like she's always trying to keep up with the Joneses, like keeping up with the she goes to church and she's very pretentious or whatever. And then her sister Daisy, like she's sort of the opposite. Like she lives in this rundown house with her husband Onslow, and then Daisy's like and their sister Rose, she lives with them as well, and she's very sort of she goes from man to man or whatever. And then there's another sister somewhere, Violet. Like she's kind of like very very rich, but she's eccentric, and so it's always like the embarrassment whenever like Hyacinth is trying to get in with her friendship groups or whatever, and then when she sees like her sister and husband or whatever, like they're very very sloppy or whatever, and then she's absolutely mortified when they turn up at the same pub that she's at.
Yeah, it's a classic phrase in that series. Just Hyacinth goes, "Oh my God, they're going to meet Onslow and Daisy. Oh God." She can't. She has to keep her family separate from her circle of friends. Oh, guys, it's. I'll have to go soon. I'll have to go.
Yeah.
God blimey, we're going for an hour and 3/4.
Yeah, yeah, because it's kind of like I was going to take a little bit of a break and just let you two talk. But this is a good stopping spot. Now there was a lot of data at the beginning, so what I was thinking about doing is just unlisting the video, download it, and cuts out the dead air and re-upload the video. Hope that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, that's okay with me, Rin. We'll be patient. I mean, it'll take probably a couple. I mean, I don't know how long, but YouTube seems to be with live streams. They seem to like take ages to process into recording, so you probably won't be able to download this for a couple of days. But,
Usually I could download live streams right away because I would download somebody else. There's this guy on YouTube and he always lists his live streams. His name is like Greg, and Greg always lists his live streams. So what I do is that as soon as the video is finished processing or whatnot, as soon as YouTube is through with processing the live stream, what I do is that I click on his channel. Sometimes I have to wait, like 5 or 15 minutes until the YouTube. Sometimes it's immediate, but then yeah, there are times where it's immediate with YouTube, not always. But then I'll just click on the live stream, put it in 4K downloader. Now 4K downloader is very good. Then I'll just download a video. Normally I could do it within 3 to 5 minutes. But this time I'll have to edit out the beginning where there's like dead air, then re-upload it.
Oh, cool. Let us know when that's done. I mean, if you can, hopefully, if you download it quick, that's great. I mean, I have real trouble with my live stream, so I don't know why. But I just download it. I do download it from the studio usually, or sometimes I'll use Real Player, and it tends to be that I get the same result, whether it's ClipGlabs, Real Player, or I just use the YouTube Studio. It's I don't know why that is. It never used to be like that. It used to be like an hour, and that'll be it. It'd be a recording. You could download it, put it up on another platform. I don't know why it's not like that anymore.
Well, use 4K downloader. I do not like StreamYard. The reason why I don't like your StreamYard is because Google Hangout was so much better. Google Hangout was definitely better because I tried to screen share. I tried to screen share my book. Mistakes were made, but not by me. But it kept flashing a lot. There were so many flashes that I was like, I give up. But it was, on topic. It was like really on topic. It really, it really went well with its topic, but because it kept flashing and flashing and flashing, I wasn't able to screen share my book.
Well, yeah, if you want to do this again, guys, I mean, I'm happy to come back. We can do another stream.
This was really great, really wonderful. The only really bad thing was how many times my screen freezes, because my screen freezes. It's like nobody's talking, and then here I am interrupting people while they're in the middle of talking. And I feel so mean and rude. It's like, oh man, that is so mean and rude. It's like, it's like, oh, Lonely Wolf, you were
No,
talking.
that's not bad.
I feel really bad, and it's like, or I interrupted you. Like I think I interrupted you being like 5 different times. It's like, oh man.
No, that's not bad, because you should see, because some of the streams that I've on, because I've got friends of mine who are really, really, really bad at interrupting. Like really bad.
It's probably just something to do with your connection. You know what I mean? It's like it may be like the bit rate gets too low for the actual capacity what's necessary for the stream. You know, it's maybe your ISP can like adjust it. I don't know. It depends where you live, because different areas have different it's broadband speeds.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
Definitely.
thank you guys for coming, and I'd like to thank everybody for
Thanks,
watching.
guys. Thanks, Onslow and
Thank you,
Emmett.
everybody.
And thanks, Lonely Wolf. Good to talk to you, and Rin as well. Once again, thank you very much for having me on your show.
All right. And we're off.